All right. Getting ready to go. Just checking some things. Okay, now it's working. Oh my goodness. My apologies for the delay. I've run into numerous technical difficulties. But hopefully we're going to be good now. Just checking the chat. Make sure that it's going to be working. So feel free to, if you're watching and in the chat, welcome. So unfortunately, numerous technical difficulties, but we're ready to get started now. Now, I had some difficulties with the computer, but hopefully that's fine. If you're noticing any issues with the stream, feel free to let me know in the chat. Oh, hello. So we've got some viewers here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the presentation since a little late. All right, so in this session of the Advancement Tech, we're talking about what is CSS. So this is episode 2. The first episode was what is HTML? And basically, Advancement Tech is basically teaching technology as it relates to advancement, fundraising, and nonprofits in general. So welcome, thank you for coming. I'm just going to go over some very quick background of who I am. We're going to have about 15 to 20 minutes of education, Q&A period, and then that'll be it. So who am I? My name is Preston Jameson. I've worked at 2 different universities over the last 12 years. Well, not the last 12 years, over 12 years. And that was a while ago. I oversaw development and advancement services when I was working for them. I founded a company that produces a product called Advancement Form, which does online giving and event registration. So what is CSS? And I'm going to try to monitor the chat while this is being live streamed. So if you have any questions, I'll check chat periodically and consult there to see if there's any questions. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, or Cascading Style Sheet. So it's a way to style your HTML. Now, this is an example of what it looks like. Excuse me. Typically, there is some sort of selector. So this is selecting what area of HTML you want to apply your styling to. And then there's a set of declarations for what you're selecting to tell you how you want it to be styled. So for instance, in this example, every P tag in HTML, or the paragraph tag, you want to style with a particular font size and make it the color red. So HTML is responsible for the content. So it's the text that includes the copy, as it were, or images, whereas CSS is responsible for the styling. So what is it colored? Is it bold? Is there padding around it, or margins? How large are they? Is there a border around a table or not, etc. So it's styling those elements as opposed to the content within them. Now, it's written using selectors. So you're selecting HTML elements to style a certain way, and those declarations are how you want it to be styled. So again, just like we looked at previously, this is the selector, and it's looking for a paragraph tag. Now, this is a convention I'm going to discuss, but if you see a dot, it means with a class called main. So it's looking for every P tag on that page that has a class of main. That's what the dot means. And then make the font size 12 pixels, align the text to the center. So that's an example of some CSS. Now, what do they mean by cascading? What that means is that a lot of HTML has a nested structure as shown here. Like maybe you have a div with a class called main, and then another div inside of it called header, and then a p tag with hello world. And if you look at normal standard HTML pages on the web, they're highly nested what the HTML is doing. But what that means is that you can apply the style high up and it will cascade down to the lower levels. So for example, if I say the div tag with the class main, that's again the dot means the class main, it's going to look for this HTML, a div with a class main, and it will apply this style to it and everything inside of it. So it will cascade down through here and make hello world that font size and the color red. And we're going to jump into some examples and look at that live in a moment here. Okay, so here are some common selectors for CSS. So the first one is an HTML tag. In other words, you could say all P elements should have this margin, should have this font size, font weight, etc. Or all div tags, or all H1s, or all images. So these are all HTML tags, and any HTML tag you can basically use as what you want to select to apply a style. The next way you can do it is using an HTML class. So if you have set p tags with a main class, you can target how you want those to be styled just by saying everything called main. And even if you can have different tags that are called main, like maybe you have an H1 called main and a div called main, well, it's going to apply those styles to both of them if you don't specify a tag here. It's going to do any element called dot with a class of main. This is another example, any element with a class of standout. But if you only want those divs that have a class of subheading, you could use this selector here. So you can use a class, and this is probably the most common use case. Next, you can use an ID. Now the selector in CSS for ID is using a pound symbol. So this selects all elements that have an ID of main on the page. As well, there's a header, and if you want to do divs that have an ID of footer, you could use this selector. So these are just examples. The other way you can do a selector is choosing nested elements. So for example, I'm going to select a section with an ID of header, and within that it needs to have a div with a class of subsection and then the p tag. So when I use this as my selector, it has to be the styles I'm going to declare for this is going to do all the p elements that are in a div with a class subsection in the section with an ID of header. And lastly, you can choose multiple elements to style. So your selector can say, you could do a section tag with an ID of header and the section tag with an ID of footer. So a comma between them allows you to do multiple elements at the same time. Okay, so now let's say you want to apply some styles. So we talked about selectors, but there's actually 3 ways to apply styles. One, the HTML has an attribute called style, so you can actually style an individual element using that. You could also use an HTML tag called style and put it within the HTML page itself. And then that allows you to style classes or IDs that you find within it. The third way is linking to a separate CSS file using the link HTML tag. And I'll show some examples of these right now. So using the HTML style attribute. So this is an example here of a div, and I'm using the attribute style, and I'm just putting the styles within it. So I need to have the saying text align colon, what I want it to be, semicolon, and then I can choose multiple styles to add on as long as I have a semicolon and then a space and then another style. I can keep adding styles to make it quite long. Now this styling gets a little bit onerous because you have to style each HTML element that way. So this is not necessarily considered a best practice, but of course you can do it. Now, need to be aware that some content management systems actually don't allow this and may strip those styles out. So that's something to keep in mind if you're trying to style HTML dynamically within a CMS. One other consideration is that a lot of times email styling, a lot of email clients strip out, don't allow CSS style sheets or style tags, but they will allow you to style elements like this in the email client. So where you do see this sometimes is when you're sending emails. So the next method is to use a style tag within a page. And typically you would place this style tag within the header. But basically you have an open tag and a closing tag, and you target using the selector what you want to style. So I'm looking for a div that has a class of special, and then I want to set the font set the font size as well as align the text to the center. So this HTML will be styled based upon the style declaration up here. So having styles within a page is possible. You don't see this used a lot, but it can be used in certain cases. So the most popular way that people use style sheets is actually linking to it. So usually within the head, you have a link tag that references a separate style sheet. So it's a separate document, usually called .css, and used a rel attribute equals style sheet that contains all the styles you're going to want to use. And in this example, within the body of the HTML, you would have it would be targeting some class in order to style that HTML. So this is the most common way you'll typically see websites do their styling, because it's much easier to manage. And you can even have multiple style sheets that have different purposes. All right, let's jump into some live coding. Okay, this is a very simple basic page that I set up. And we're going to take a look at the HTML that's generating this, and then I actually do have a separate style sheet that's being included. So in terms of what's being shown here, this is a typical HTML document like we saw in the previous episode of Advancement Tech. Within the head, I am linking in this separate style sheet that's listed here, and it's just a very simple one selector and one declaration. But we'll look at this in a minute. But again, the body is actually what you see. So the readable content starts here. And you'll see an H1 tag that says, what is CSS? This is a paragraph, this is a paragraph. And then you'll see an HR tag, which is a horizontal rule just to separate it. So this is not styled at all with anything, because I haven't said H1 should be this, or all P tags should be this. So there's no styling that has been applied to this. The browser has a default styling, and that's, for example, why you see an H1 bigger than what's in a paragraph tag. Okay, now first, this one we're going to style using HTML style attribute. So here I gave this P tag an attribute style, and I said make it the color blue. So as you can see, this color is blue. And I could make it text center or apply other styles to it, and it would adjust the styling of this element here. So that's, again, one way using the style attribute on HTML. The next way is you can do on page. So this next example, style using CSS using an HTML style, you'll see I have two P tags here. I use the ID to make this text green. So I have a P tag with an ID equals green. And I just chose green for simplicity, but it could have been make it simple or make it complex, or I could have used any term that I would want, as long as in my styles I target the same thing. So for example, if I say simple, and I save it, I'm going to lose that style because now it's no longer green because it can't match. But if I put simple here, and save it. So now it will be able to find it, the ID of simple. Now it's gone back to green. And then the class purple, I'm using a class here, so I need to use the dot. So any p tag with a class of purple, make it the color purple. And again, you could add additional styles here, making it bold, etc. So if I do font weight bold, it should bold that. Now I'm not going to cover a lot of the different ways you can make declarations. I'm trying to keep it simple for now, at least this particular episode, but there's a great many ways you can style different elements using CSS. But we're just introducing a few here. So this is the second way to do it, having a style tag within your page. Usually you see this in the header, but it can be in other areas of the page. Like this is just right above it, but that's just something to keep in mind. All right, so then we look at style using CSS in a linked style sheet. So you'll see, use a class to make this text red, and it is red, and it has class red, but if you look, there's no styling here. It's looking for a class. This doesn't mention the class at all. So where this class is in the style sheet. So in the style sheet, it says, if there's a class of red, make the color red. And that's because it's linking in this separate style sheet and making reference to that the relationship is a style sheet. And that's what makes that color red. Now lastly, wanted to look at a cascading example. So you can see right from the p tag we have this text is not red because there's nothing calling it red, it's just the default color. And then we have a div that is the class of red. So as we know from the style sheet, we set anything with a class of red is going to be red. Now here we see that the p tag, it says this text is red, and even a p tag nested within this separate div with a class of special, it says this text is red too. So again, it cascades through all the way down. Now I could say the class of special should be purple or should be centered, and then only this text would be styled that way. All right, so that's a quick introduction to some live coding. Now I just want to take a look at an actual site here. So this is the advancementforum.com website. I'm going to right-click it and go to View Page Source. Now we looked at this last time, so this is the HTML page of the site. And we can see there's a lot of nested things, which that's why the cascading style sheet is beneficial, because you can, it cascades and all those styled elements flow down. Now what you'll also see, a lot of elements have classes. So again, classes are used a lot for styling. They can also be used for JavaScript, but that helps target the particular element for styling. Now again, like I mentioned before, the most common way that sites style themselves is through a linked style sheet. So this one has one of those here. If I click on it, it's actually going to open it up. Now again, this is going to be super intimidating, all of these different styles, because what a lot of sites, and it's very hard to read, it's incredibly hard to read. You really can't read it. Now what sites tend to do is they minimize and eliminate white space to make the site more efficient. So it's very hard to try to read what's going on by viewing the source, what I just did. However, the better way to do it, in my opinion, if you want to look at how something is styled, is to actually go to it. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to right-click and go to Inspect. So I'm going to inspect this element. And like we saw last week at the first episode, you see all the different HTML elements, and I'm looking at this H5 tag here. And if I open it up, it does say online giving. But we didn't discuss this area to the right, but the area to the right are the styles. So it's telling you how this is being styled. So if you look, this particular element is being assigned a color, and it's telling you what part of this is the selector. So this is a large selector. It gets a little complex depending upon the website. but you can see it's looking for a class of image BG, and then it has a not that it's image light, and also any class with a, oh, and within it, the class has to be BG hyphen hyphen white, and then within that, an H5 tag. So this kind of tells you what's going on with the styles. Now, one thing that may be able to help you to understand how some of this works is that you can actually dynamically in the website adjust the style to see what happens. So for example, I see this H5 has been set a font weight of 600. If I click this, it's actually going to disable this style. Now, if I click it, you could see, okay, that is no longer bold. If I click it, the bolding comes back. So you can use this to try and figure out kind of a style or what kind of effect you want. You can even add certain styles here. So for example, if I go up to here and this color is being set, you can actually type in something here, like I'm going to say make this red. And now suddenly what happens is all those elements are red now that match the selector. Now, and you can tell that this is no longer valid because this style is the one that's lower in the style sheet, so it takes precedence. But I can easily just click it and the red turns off and it goes back to its normal thing. Now, you can make changes like this just to see, but all the changes you're making are just within your web browser if you're going to try to change things this way or disable them. So to get back how things are normal, like I'll turn this back on so it's red, you just refresh the browser and everything comes back to the way it defaults. So that's just something to keep in mind, but it kind of helps you looking at the styles, understand some of what's going on. Again, with a complex website, this will be difficult to do, but if you're wanting to learn more about CSS, this is one way to do it. The other thing I want to mention that right next to the styles is actually computed. What this is it's looking at all the different styling rules that are set for a particular element. So we have this H5 tag selected, and it's telling you what the result of all the styling rules are. So the font family is this, the font size is this, the font weight is this. So what's the margin, what's the padding, etc. So all those different rules have been applied to this, and you can kind of understand what styles are impacting something. All right, so next I'm just going to jump into an example here. So one thing advancement form can do is it can, at certain plan levels, it allows you to use CSS to style any part of the page. So for example, we have just a very simple form here, and you'll see that the field label is red. So if I go into this edit style area, you can see you can create styles, and those styles can affect the whole page, or if you want to style certain elements, you can actually use classes to do it. So for example, in this case, I'm saying make the color red something that has the class of special. So what has a class of special? You can actually, for each form element, you can go in and edit it and say what CSS classes you want to be on that form element. So basically, using this technique, not only can you put in any CSS to style this, you could make, for instance, this title left aligned or right aligned, or change the colors, or even background image, things of that nature. But you can style the individual elements of the form. But essentially, we're just using the same techniques for setting up CSS, or allowing you control the CSS to style the page and even the individual fields the way you want. Okay. All right, so that's pretty much the presentation. Wondered if there are any questions about CSS. If you don't have any questions, I guess I'm wondering, do you have any thoughts about what potentially you may want to learn more about CSS? So while I'm doing that, let me mention what the upcoming shows are. So next Friday at 4 p.m., February the 8th, is going to be What is JavaScript? So we're going to take a look at some JavaScript, how to work it, how to use it, and how it's used in websites today. Now, after that, we're going to be covering additional topics. So I am looking for suggestions on future topics that you would find beneficial. So you can feel free to leave a comment in the video and let me know kind of what you would be interested in hearing about next. I do have some ideas, but would like to hear more from the audience. Okay, so I don't have any, don't see any questions in the chat right now. If you're interested in learning more about the Advancement Tech Show and want to be notified of new episodes, you can head over to advtech.tv, and that will direct you to the Advancement Tech Show site. It'll tell you what shows are coming up, as well as you can look at the historical videos that are there. So I welcome you to sign up to the email list to get notifications of when episodes come out and what the future episodes are. This is also, we're doing live streaming on YouTube, so you're also welcome to go to the YouTube channel and subscribe there as well if you'd like. All right, I don't see any questions in the chat right now. However, I will hang around for a minute or two more to see if anyone says anything. Other than that, thank you for attending, and I'll talk to you next week at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.